Hi and welcome back. In this video we're going to be looking at the optative mood. It's unreal. The optative mood is the last of the true verbal moods in Greek. We started with the indicative, which speaks about real action, or at least action that's being considered to be real from the standpoint of the speaker. The imperative is action that hasn't happened but is being commanded. The subjunctive deals with possible action, and the optative is dealing with unreal action. It's like the subjunctive, but further removed from reality. The subjunctive is the mood of a wish, one step further removed from reality than the subject, which speaks about a possibility. This is a more remote possibility, like a wish. Here are the parts of a present active optative verb. There's no augment, of course, not just because we're dealing with the present tense, but also because we're outside the indicative mood. So by definition, we won't use any augment. The stem is lu for luo. We don't have any tense marker for the present, and the present usually uses a connecting vowel that's omicron. And we now, with the optative, have a mood marker, which is the first time we've seen anything quite like this. The mood marker here is an iota that follows the connecting vowel. And then we add a personal ending, which for the first person singular in the optative is me, which looks like a me verb, so don't confuse the me ending of the optative with the more common, much more common, me ending on verbs like didomi and histemi. The complete form, then, of the first person singular present active optative is luoimi. Here are the optative active endings, and really they're just the secondary personal endings, but there's one difference, and that is in the first person singular we have this funny me ending. When we look at the forms of luo as an example, we see the really distinctive omicron iota combination, the diphthong oi, that we get when we combine the connecting vowel with that mood marker, the iota. And that combination of a connecting vowel with the iota is going to be typical of all optative forms. That's how you can recognize most of them very easily. So the first person singular will be luoimi, second person singular luois, third person luoi, plural luoimen, second person plural luoita, and third person plural luoien. Just notice there that even though the ending is usually just a nun, I think for purposes of pronunciation, the Greeks added an epsilon in front of the new ending in the third person plural. Moving to the first aorist, we really don't make very many changes. We're going to use exactly the same personal endings. The mood marker is still there, but we do add a tense marker, the typical sigma for the first aorist, and the connecting vowel, as usual in the first aorist, has shifted from an omicron to now an alpha. So our first person singular form is lusaimi. After that, the second person singular is lusais. Then we have lusai. In the plural, we have lusimon, lusaita, and lusaien. So once you get the hang of the optative active endings, really it's very simple to put together the aorist because you're just adding that sigma tense marker and shifting the connecting vowel to an alpha, things that we're used to doing in the first aorist anyway. What sets this apart as clearly optative is that iota mood marker. So it's not lusas in the second person singular, but lusais. The second aorist optative active is very similar, But as with second aorists in the indicative mood, we now use the changed stem, the second aorist stem, and leave off any sigma tense marker. And we also are still using the omicron connecting vowel that was typical of the present, not the alpha that's typical of the first aorist. If we keep those things in mind, we'll notice we're using, again, exactly the same personal endings as the present tense, and we get beloimi, belois, beloi, beloimen, beloite, and beloien. The optative middle and passive endings are just the secondary middle passive personal endings. So we've seen these with tenses like the imperfect tense, for example. The first person singular is main. The second person singular is just an omicron. The third person singular is ta. In the plural we have metha, esthe, and enta. Here's a present optative middle and passive example. Again, using luo, we have the same oi diphthong with the connecting vowel and the iota mood marker, and we just add on those secondary middle and passive endings. Luoimain, luoia, luoita, luoimetha, luoisthe, and luointa. Notice that in the second person singular, this is one of the very few cases where that omicron ending doesn't collapse together with the connecting vowel to make something like an omicron upsilon diphthong or an omega. Here the omicron is visible because it's separated from the omicron connecting vowel by this iota mood indicator. Again, to make the first aorist optative middle, we just add in the sigma tense marker and shift the connecting vowel to alpha. That gives us, in the first aorist optative middle, the first person singular form lucaimain, second person singular lucaia, third person lucaita, and in the plural lucaimetha, lucaisthe, lucainta. Again, the point isn't to memorize all of these endings, but to memorize the changes that you have to make when you go from one tense to another. And so, to get the second aorist optative middle, we do the same thing that we did with the second aorist optative active. We use the second aorist stem of the verb, add on to it the omicron connecting vowel and the iota, and then use the secondary middle endings. So the first person is beloimain, second person is beloia, third person is beloita, etc. In the aorist passive, we're going to use the same endings that we used in the aorist passive indicative. Ain, ace, a, amen, eta, and ason, with that eta as something like a connecting vowel, although we're going to see in a moment it's not really the connecting vowel. Here's a first aorist passive optative example. Again, luo. We have the stem of the verb lu. We have the theta epsilon combination that was typical, if you remember, of aorist passive participles. And then we add that same mood indicator that we've been adding all the way along, the iota, and then we add the typical aorist passive endings. So that gives us lutheain, luthease, lutheae, lutheamen, lutheata, and lutheason. To get the second aorist passive optative, all we do is, again, take out the theta tense marker and use the second aorist passive stem. And if you remember, grapho is a second aorist passive, so that gives us grapheain, graphease, grapheae, grapheamen, grapheata, and grapheason. Interestingly, The present optative forms of Eίμι look a remarkable amount like the aorist passive forms. We have these same endings, ein, eis, e, aimen, eta, eison. And we have reduced the stem of Eίμι to just an epsilon. We still have our iota mood indicator for the optative, and so the forms are eein, eis, ea, eamen, eeta, and eason. So how do we use the optative mood? It's actually fairly simple to put together if we just keep in mind that that mood indicator that intrudes between the connecting vowel and the ending. All of the other tense forms are really quite regular. Well, using the optative mood will most commonly be a matter of expressing some sort of wish that something would or would not happen. This is what is called by grammarians the voluntative optative. We translate this, at least as a starting point, using the English helping word may. So the common expression me genoita means may it never be, or let it never happen. The expression do eleos hakurios means may the Lord give mercy. So you see how the helper word may in both cases expresses in English the same kind of distance between reality and the action we're talking about. It's not that the action is definitely unreal, but in both cases the reality, the possible reality of the action ever happening is fairly remote. So we say me genoita, may it never be, and we're not considering the action we're referring to as even a possibility, although theoretically it would be possible. Similarly, do eleos hakurios, may the Lord give mercy. Here the action is not quite so remote from reality. We actually hope it will happen, but it's not as strong as a definite request, or even the subjunctive where we're saying, well, it may happen. We're saying, may it happen. We're expressing a wish that it will happen without necessarily any definite expectation that it will. You can learn more about the optative mood in Mounce's Basics of Biblical Greek, and I've given you the page and section numbers for the 3rd edition, and in Wallace's Basics of New Testament Syntax, and I've given you the page numbers there for the 1st edition.